Nero remains one of the most infamous emperors in Roman history, not only for his political controversies and brutal rule, but also for some of the most bizarre and unsettling personal choices he ever made. Among the strangest and most shocking episodes tied to his name is the story of how he had a young boy, named Sporus, castrated only to marry him and present him to the Roman world as a replacement for his deceased wife Poppaea Sabina. The story is unsettling, layered with political intrigue, questions about power and control, and serves as a window into the extreme measures of imperial Rome when authority was unchecked. To fully understand this episode, one needs to break down who Nero was, who Sporus was, and how the cultural and social atmosphere of Rome allowed something like this to unfold without total collapse of imperial dignity. Nero was the last emperor of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, a line that had ruled Rome since the time of Augustus. He came to power at a very young age, heavily influenced by his mother, Agrippina the Younger, who orchestrated much of his rise. However, once Nero consolidated power, he began distancing himself from her influence, ultimately ordering her assassination when he feared she was too powerful. His reign is often characterized by cruelty, extravagance, and a theatrical obsession with art, music, and performance. He saw himself as more than just an emperor. He wanted to be adored as a performer, an artist, and a godlike figure. But beneath this facade of grandeur was a man plagued by paranoia, unstable impulses, and ruthless ambition. His relationship with women reveals much about his darker impulses. Poppaea Sabina, Nero's second wife, was a woman renowned for her beauty and ambition. She became empress after Nero divorced and exiled his first wife, Octavia. Poppaea was not just a partner but also a symbol of status and power for Nero. She bore him a child, though the baby died young, and she herself died in 65 CE, under circumstances that remain debated. Ancient sources suggest Nero, in a fit of rage, kicked her to death while she was pregnant. Whether this account is exaggerated or not, her death left Nero in a state of grief, mixed with obsession. He desired her presence so strongly that he allegedly sought replacements, even searching among young boys who could resemble her features. This is where Sporus enters the story. Sporus was a young boy, likely a slave or at least of non-elite status, who resembled Poppaea in face and build. According to historians like Suetonius and Cassius Dio, Nero became so obsessed with the resemblance that he ordered Sporus to be castrated so the boy could not develop masculine traits that would spoil the illusion. After the operation, Nero dressed him in the finest clothing, adorned him with jewels, and even held a grand wedding ceremony in which Sporus took on the role of Poppaea reborn. Roman citizens were both shocked and horrified, but at the same time powerless to challenge the emperor. This bizarre relationship had multiple layers. On the surface, it seems like a grotesque manifestation of Nero's grief and obsession, but it was also a performance of power. In Rome, masculinity was tied deeply to social roles and hierarchy. For an emperor to openly present a castrated boy as a wife, parading him in public, was a display not only of indulgence but of complete domination over Roman social norms. It sent a message that the emperor was above all laws, traditions, and expectations. The spectacle itself became a part of Nero's performance-driven reign, reinforcing his image as someone beyond conventional morality. In terms of design elements, what Nero did was steeped in theatricality. He staged a wedding with pomp and grandeur, likely involving Roman rituals and pageantry normally reserved for traditional unions. Sporus was dressed in imperial garments, a clear attempt to mirror the image of Poppaea. This wasn't just a private arrangement, it was a spectacle for the Roman people to witness. The symbolism of clothing, makeup, and presentation was essential. Nero's reign was full of performances in arenas, theaters, and public spaces. So it makes sense that even his most private obsessions were given a performative, staged design. The marriage to Sporus was essentially a show, and the boy became a prop in Nero's never-ending theatrical performance of his life. The unique selling point of this episode, if one were to describe it that way, is the extreme intersection of power, personal obsession, and performance. Very few rulers in history have taken personal grief and turned it into such a public controversial and disturbing arrangement. Sporus was not just a boy forced into an unnatural role. He became a living symbol of Nero's unchecked authority. The fact that he could take a child, mutilate him, and present him as an empress without anyone daring to stop him underscores the terrifying scope of imperial power. For a layperson trying to grasp the gravity of this story, it's important to think beyond just the strangeness of Nero's actions. It wasn't simply about perversion or grief, it was about demonstrating control over every aspect of Roman life. When a ruler can redefine gender roles, marriage customs, and even the sanctity of the imperial family to fit his whims, it shows how absolute his authority had become. For Romans, who valued tradition, this was scandalous, but opposition often meant death, so most accepted, or at least tolerated, the spectacle. Sporus' story didn't end with Nero's death. After the emperor's downfall and suicide in 68 CE, Sporus was passed among other powerful men. Otho, who had also been married to Poppaea before Nero, took Sporus as a companion, continuing the eerie cycle of projection and obsession with Poppaea's memory. Later, Sporus found himself in the hands of Vitellius, another emperor during Rome's chaotic year of the four emperors. Vitellius reportedly mocked Sporus, planning to humiliate him publicly by making him play the role of a maiden in a grotesque ceremony. Faced with this final indignity, Sporus took his own life. His fate highlights how he was less a person in the eyes of Rome's Espinoules and more, a pawn, a living relic of imperial obsession and cruelty. When evaluating this episode in terms of performance aspects, one must recognize how much it resembled a continuous theatrical production. Nero thrived on performance. He participated in chariot races, performed music and poetry before audiences, and demanded applause like a professional entertainer. His marriage to Sporus wasn't just personal indulgence. It was part of his ongoing need to shock, dazzle, and control public attention. The performance of Sporus as Poppaea was a macabre stage act designed to blur the line between reality and theater in the imperial palace. From a cultural design standpoint, Nero's actions undermined Roman ideals of masculinity and family. Roman society valued patriarchal power, the continuation of bloodlines, and clear gender distinctions. By forcing Sporus into the role of a wife, Nero created a parody of Roman marriage traditions. Yet it was precisely this inversion of values that highlighted his absolute dominance. He could mock tradition and still have the world bow to him. The design of this act was one of inversion and shock value, challenging the very foundations of Roman identity. For modern audiences, this story remains striking not only for its brutality but for its eerie resonance with the idea of leaders using spectacle to distract, manipulate, and dominate. Nero's decision to castrate Sporus was not only personal but deeply political. It reinforced the emperor's image as someone untouchable, someone who could bend reality itself to his desires. The young boy's tragedy is a testament to the costs of living under such concentrated power. Sporus himself, though victimized, became one of the most peculiar figures in Roman history. His life illustrates the vulnerability of individuals under autocracy, especially when they are caught in the orbit of rulers, who treat humans as objects in their own drama. While he was powerless during his life, his story endures as one of the most memorable and haunting examples of imperial excess. Nero's obsession has been retold for centuries, not because it was common, but because it was so extreme, so unsettling, and so symbolic of unchecked tyranny. This episode remains a key reminder that history is not only about battles, laws, and politics, but also about the deeply personal obsessions of those in power. Nero's castration and marriage of Sporus blend tragedy, theater, and horror in a way that no other emperor quite matched. It reflects the dangerous interplay of personal loss, psychological instability, and absolute power. And in the story of Sporus, one sees how individuals could be consumed, reshaped, and destroyed to fit the fantasies of Rome's most notorious ruler.